internet. Today we're going to do something special and something a little different. We're going to be reviewing Gregg Araki's great film Whitebird in the Blizzard. So I want to make three things very clear before we start the review. I am not a cinema expert, meaning that I'm not going to talk about direction, how the actors perform, how the lights are composed, how the direction goes. None of that. That's not my specialty. I'm into psychoanalysis, and that's what we're going to do here. Psychoanalyze the characters. Bringing me to my second point. Fundamentally, I'm focusing on the characters. This is not an analysis of Araki or any of the writers of this movie. This is purely about the characters and how psychoanalysis can help understand certain of their mentalities. Third and lastly, I'm going to spoil the hell out of this movie. So if you haven't seen it and it's a mystery movie, you might want to stop this video and go and watch it and come back if you ever want to. So now let's start with the proper analysis. So for this, I'm going to divide this analysis into 4 parts. The 4 fundamental parts being the 4 main characters of the movie. Even if Kate is the main character, the film evolves around those 4 people. So it's Kate, obviously, the main character, the teenager, her mother, Eve, her father, Mr. Connors, and her boyfriend, Phil. So let's start with the main character. Kate is a character that's very interesting because she is confronted with her mother vanishing. It's given from the get-go in the movie that she has vanished and that they don't know where she's gone. And Kate deals very interestingly with this vanishing. She doesn't seem to worry, and she virtually, on an emotional level, doesn't seem to really care, as she feels that her mother could be gone anywhere, but that seems strange to her. She often, in a way, presents a facade to the world, a persona, that she doesn't really go beneath. In a way, she's much like her father in this regard, that she presents something to the world, a role that she's playing. She even says when she's going to see the therapist that she's playing her role, and very badly at that. And her dealing with the vanishing is that of denial, in a way, because even though she's not denying that her mother has vanished, she's kind of denying that has any impact on her. A denial that we can see through her dreams also, of frost, blizzard. In a way, something is in the frost, but she can't quite see it. Which shows, very interestingly enough, that unconsciously she is completely aware of what has happened. She's aware that her mother, the corpse of her mother, is in the freezer, which is shown in the last dream, in which the mother breaks through the freezer, and in which she then tries to open up the freezer, which is locked. And fundamentally, she's prevented at the last moment by her father. But it shows that on an unconscious level, she's completely aware of what is happening. And the frost is both a denial and also a freezing of time, perhaps even something that is inclined to be traumatic, as trauma tries to freeze the moment. That's exactly what's happening for Kate. She's freezing the departure of her mother as if she was unaffected by the phenomena. And it's a freezing that we can also see in her personality, as she doesn't seem to deeply connect with others, but only on a superficial level, through sexuality, but also through her friendships. She never investigates herself, and when she's at her therapist's, which is presupposed to be of analytic orientation, she doesn't really open up. The analyst has to pry a bit to get her to talk, and that she doesn't really express herself or reflect. That lack of reflection is often something to do with trauma, that she is unable to deal consciously with what her unconscious has already put together. That the father has murdered her mother, and that he has put her in the freezer. And that she feels it on an unconscious level, but she is unable to accept that. She's only able to start envisaging that her father might have killed her when the policeman which she has sex with tells her, well, it's most likely your father, even if I can't prove it. That provokes in her aggression. For the one of the first times in the movie, she's able to manifest anger, an anger that's going to be productive as it starts to break the denial. And she's only able to hear it, even though her friends have told her many times that they suspect his father, or her father rather. She does not hear them, she does not listen to them. She just ignores them. And it's very interesting because we, viewers of the movie, are never shown those moments where her friends are suspicious of her father, of Mr. Connors. We are never shown that because she herself could not hear it. We are only shown it when she has sex with the police officer and it then reveals his insights. And I also suspect that she was able to hear it from him because he was a man that was genuine. He was broken, he was pained, but he was able to share it. Something that her father was always unable to do. It seems that her father was always carefully putting a persona in which he was able to be an okay-ish father, but unable to connect with her on a deeper level. But that policeman, by sharing his suffering, his pain, was able to connect with her on a deep emotional level. And it's a deep emotional level that, and through the connection, has helped her realize, and something of her unconscious mind started to break through at that moment of realization. And when she realizes it, things become clearer. She's able to confront her father. Even if the father is in denial, she's still able to try and go forward with that revelation. And it's at that moment that she becomes really fully independent. As before, she was not really independent of her father, following in his footsteps. Perhaps she followed in the footsteps of the father because following in those of her mother was impossible. So why was it impossible? Well, it's shown throughout the movie that Kate's mother, Eve, was a woman that is deeply unsatisfied with her life, that she is unable to achieve orgasm with her partner. She is deeply frustrated that her life has led her to this result. She feels all the extent of the time that passes. She feels insecure about her age, and perhaps she's even afraid of death. That fear of death is common in midlife crises, which I think Eve is experiencing at the time of the movie. But that's very, very interesting. That midlife crisis leads her to a sort of mental breakdown in which she's going to confuse herself with Kate. There is that very, very intense moment where she looks at Kate and says, "When I was you." Meaning that the identity of Eve is confused with the one of Kate. That in Eve's mind, she's becoming Kate. And she's doing that, I think, because at her core, Eve is unable to deal with the fact that Kate is becoming her own person. She's becoming an adult and an independent human. Something that I think is very deeply fragilisant in French. That she's weak to that. And as if Kate was ripping a part of her ego. That for Eve, Kate and her formed one symbiotic entity of a child admirating her mother, a child fulfilling the needs of admiration and of love and of care towards a mother. But without that child, or with that child being confrontational, being putting boundaries in place, well, there's no more fusion, which I think deeply unsettles Eve, Kate's mother, an unsettling that provokes a form of merging in her mind with her daughter. And this is no more evident than when she tries to seduce Phil, Kate's boyfriend. A seduction that she's very apparent about. She even does it in front of Kate, as if Kate was not going to revolt, as if Kate was just going to let her. In a way, I think also that this whole situation triggers her own Oedipal drives towards the partner of her daughter, as if she had herself become the daughter and that Kate had become the mother. So an inversion of positions, and also something of an incestual relationship in which fundamentally, if Phil is Kate's boyfriend, Phil can also be Eve's boyfriend, meaning there's no generational difference between the two. They're like the same person. They merge to become one, so therefore they can share. And it's something that's very interesting, as fundamentally Kate is capable, and that's a very positive sign, of fighting off her mother on this, on telling her off, on confronting her. And that's something that is deeply unsettling for Kate's mother, Eve. She feels that she's losing herself, and that's something that's very clear within the movie, that she's losing herself to aging, she's losing herself mentally, and she's losing her daughter, i.e. an extension of herself, or how she perceives her daughter to be an extension of herself. So she's lost. And it's a dimension that is compounded by, at the very end, when she laughs uncontrollably, she has completely lost herself in the traumatic experience. So the end, or the plot twist, is when the father of Kate murders Eve. So again, very interesting, because the father, which was up to this point presented as someone completely normal, like a counter position to the mother, is shown to be, in a way, the other side of the coin of the mother. If the mother was outright inadapted and outright seductive, the father was much more hidden in his way. Perhaps the father has always had to hide, as his attraction to men would have been condemned in his time. Because remember, if we are to take the dates, the father would have been born in the 40s, and homosexuality or bisexuality were still considered, and in those days, as some form of sexual perversions. So he would have had to have hidden it to avoid humiliation, belittlement, or even being pathologized. So everything for the father was hidden. Perhaps he himself could not live his experience to the fullest, as the mother could not live hers because she was stuck in the role of a stay-at-home mum, which he was deeply unsatisfied with. He was deeply unsatisfied with not being able to express his full sexuality. And therefore they both are, in a way, frustrated deeply with their lives. But the father, he has sex with Phil, showing that, in a way, they're not so different. They're, in a way, the same. And, however, he kills her, most likely, and this is a hypothesis never stated in the film, because, unfortunately, all those fears that he's been repressing come forward when she mocks him, belittles him through her laughter, or at least how he perceives it to be belittlement. So he kills her in order for that to cease, and in order to prevent anyone from knowing his secret, because he's in a way deeply ashamed for what he's done. But by killing her, he also incorporates her, meaning that parts of Eve become parts of him, because he, in the guilt, kept Eve within his mind. Something that we can see through the fact that he starts drinking alcohol, being intoxicated more often. He starts to, in a way, try and make everything vanish, but also understands the atrocity of what he has done. And I think that, in a way, he self-punishes at the very end by revealing that he had killed Eve at the moment where his own daughter suspects him. Perhaps the suspicion of the daughter was the final straw in his mind, that even the person he tried to pretend to all these years finally understood that it was only pretense. And I think that's what also Kate, the teenager, was so focused on. She had to pretend, because that was the only way of making this system work, was pretense for all of them. But Eve, Kate's mother, was not having no longer any of that. She became too frustrated to keep on the facade. The father, he kept on, and Kate kept on in many ways. But it's only through the revelation of a genuine human being, of his trauma, of his sadness, that she was able to connect with her own trauma and sadness and reveal what was always there, but she was unaware of. So very, very interesting dynamics. And we can also think that having sex with the police officer was a final step to her individuation, that she completely broke free at the moment where she had that sexual moment with the confidants of that police officer, as fundamentally Phil and her father are one and the same. Both hide their homosexuality or their bisexuality by shame, and one can think that Phil is ashamed of it and self-punishes through the fact of having jobs that he hates and remaining in those jobs when he could do better, as stated by Kate in the movie. So we can see that in a way she's perhaps attracted to Phil because Phil is like her father, that they both seem normal, as she said that when you scratch the surface there's still the surface, but it's not as innocent as she thinks it is, because that surface is a protection. It's like a false self that hides a true self that's very vulnerable, and that's exactly what it is. Their homosexuality or their attraction to men, should I be more precise or more accurate, is at the very core what they are, their true selves, their real, authentic, genuine being, but they can't reveal it because they feel that society would make them feel shame for it. That attraction being seen as something that has to be repressed, and therefore it has to be repressed to the point where murder is the only option for repression. And we can see here that through that the father and Phil both internalize guilt and shame instead of being able to live their lives. And that's what Kate feels when she's with them, that you have to pretend, because if you don't pretend, then everything is destroyed, and the risk is being destroyed by that shame and guilt. So in a way she stays loyal to her family or to her father. It's only the actions of another man that help her break free, and she also breaks free of her Oedipus complex at that moment, choosing a real other object rather than her father, or just a copy of her father. So that is pretty much my take on the movie. It's a brilliant movie, and really I would highly recommend it. Even if you have spoiled everything, I'm sure you'd find scenes of high interest, because it's just such a beautiful film, and it has nailed so many scenes psychoanalytically speaking, that I really wanted to talk about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Also, I want to say that nothing of this is absolute truth. It's like my take on the movie, on the characters of the movie. I just hope that you found it interesting, because I really wanted to talk about it. So I hope you liked it. If you have anything you want to ask, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!